The next major event that influenced the modern Coast Guard would not occur until nearly 5 decades later at the start of the United States Civil War in 1861. The most famous cutter in this conflict was the United States Revenue Cutter, or USRC, Harriet McLane, or simply the Harriet Lane, which is known to have fired the first shots into Charleston Harbor at the beginning of the Civil War in April 1861. As the war progressed, the Harriet Lane and other USRCs were brought under the command of the Navy and assisted in national defense and the execution of naval squadrons and blockades during the remainder of the Civil War. Also, revenue cutters were involved in the transport of troops during the war as well, as evidenced by the voyages of the USRC Miami, which also was used to transport Navy troops to certain areas during the Civil War. The USRC Miami was also famous for transporting President Lincoln himself to certain areas to scout out areas for Union troops or Union ships to abide during the war. Perhaps one of the most famous revenue cutter vessels during the war, besides the McLane and the Miami, was the USRC Naugatuck. Also known as the Ironside, the Naugatuck was instrumental in facilitating the Union blockade during the Civil War and aided in shore bombardments along the Confederate coastlines as well. In the wake of the war, the Ironside would return to the Treasury Department and continue to serve until 1889 before it was sold and decommissioned from the United States Revenue Marine. After the Civil War, the history of the Coast Guard transitions to another preceding agency known as the United States Life-Saving Service, founded in 1872 by President Ulysses S. Grant. The Life-Saving Service had existed informally since the 1840s when the Revenue Marine began to assist mariners along America's shorelines. However, as the need for coastal assistance became greater, it evolved into an official government agency under the direction of the Treasury Department and the Revenue Marine. For just over 4 decades, the U.S. Revenue Marine, that would eventually become known as the Revenue Cutter Service, and the U.S. Life-Saving Service worked interdependently to promote marine assistance and life-saving stations along various ports along the coast of the United States, primarily the East Coast. During wartime, especially during the Spanish-American War, the United States Revenue Cutters and the United States Life-Saving Service role became heightened, and a legacy of search and rescue and national defense was established by these two agencies.